economic and political implications. Well, I will start with the Catechism of the Catholic Church. We know that to instruct the poor is the first work of spiritual mercy. And the first work of material mercy is to feed the starving. Now, it seems to me that between these two works of mercy, there is a stronger connection than we were used to think. Because the message that Mr. Quintarelli conveys to us is that knowledge is power. Bacon had already said this, but that now the main resource for man is exactly knowledge. We were used to think for several centuries that the main instrument through which man could work and could preserve his life on the earth was the land. The possession of the land was the measure of wealth. And it was so up to the 18th century, Professor Zamani, more or less, with the physiocrats. Then, with the Industrial Revolution, we discover a new measure of wealth. And this new measure of wealth is capital. When capital means, first of all, the machines that are used for the production of goods, but comes to mean in general all what can be an instrument for human work, the land included, but not only the land and not mainly the land. Now, if you go back to the Old Testament, you see that the Old Testament sees very well that God has created the earth and has given the earth to all men in order that they may live. Then men have divided the earth among themselves in order better to exploit the earth, and that is good, but nevertheless the earth remains ultimately a property of God. And once in 50 years, in 49 years, everybody should go back to his land. In St. Thomas Aquinas, this becomes the idea that all men should have a possibility of making a living. Today, we do not expect to make a living out of the possession of a piece of land. I will not be able to till the land, by the way. You expect to make a living out of your participation in the work of society, having a role in the work of society, and you expect to have the instruments to play a role in society. Now, it seems that not in the next future, already today, the possession of this instrument of knowledge is a fundamental tool in order to make a living. It is not so much an instrument in itself, it is a great multiplier of all the instruments that you have. So the poverty contained in the denial of access to the knowledge of the information and communication technologies, not only that, contained in the impossibility of being connected through these systems, there are two different elements, becomes one of the main constituents of poverty today. And when we devise strategies to draw countries out of the situation of poverty, or when we think of the problem of inequality, the digital divide should be one of our main concerns. The digital divide is the difference existing between those who can use these instruments and those who can't. And not to be able to use these instruments has two sides. On the one side, not to be able to use them means that you have not learned how they work. It is a problem of education. The other aspect is that you do not have the access to the needed infrastructure. A large part of the world is not digitalized or not adequately digitalized, so that you cannot make use of these instruments there. But there is also a third aspect. It was at the end of the exposition of Mr. Quintarelli. In this area, monopolies can be very easily constructed. I give you one example. Only a few years or months ago, Alibaba was constituted. You know what is Alibaba? Alibaba is a kind of fictional shop in which you find whatever you may be willing to buy. And if you are a producer of goods in the West and you want to sell in China, you must be on Alibaba. If you are not on Alibaba, you will not sell. Perhaps your production is of better quality, perhaps it is cheaper, perhaps it is better than those of your competitors who are on Alibaba. No matter what, if you are not there, nobody will know about you and nobody will buy what you produce. So the problem of the liberty of access to these great networks is the difference between life and death for a large number of small companies, and also for large companies. Well, large companies may try, they will not succeed, but may try for a while to create their own distribution and communication channels. But for small companies, it is absolutely vital. So we are confronted with a new kind of exclusion, a new kind of poverty that is strategic for the future of mankind. It seems to me that up to now, the Church has not completely been aware of this reality. Well, in Centesimus Annus, you find one paragraph in which St. John Paul II speaks about the economy of knowledge and the fact that knowledge becomes more and more a decisive factor in development. And you find there also the mention of, I think you find the mention also of ICT. But between what ICT was in 1991 and what it is today, there is a tremendous difference. So we should introduce this element into our considerations. Another element. I have mentioned Alibaba. I could mention Booking.com, Airbnb. When you go on vacation or when you make a trip for business reasons and you book a room in an hotel, as a rule, you make use of Booking.com. Perhaps you did not even notice that, but you do. And if you go on vacation and you want to have a flat somewhere, you use Airbnb. And they take from 9% to 30% of the added value of the operation. Well, that's already a problem, might be a problem, because their costs are very limited for the reasons exposed in the beginning by Quintarelli. But there is a further problem. Do they pay taxes on these revenues? Where should they pay taxes? In the country in which the service is produced? In the country of the customer? In the country in which the mediator lives? Where? At least they choose the country where they want to pay taxes. You know the story in Europe with Ireland and with the huge fine that has been comminated by the European Commission. At least they choose the place in which they prefer to pay taxes because there they pay no taxes. But sometimes they do not pay any taxes at all. And here you have a typical case in which you need governance. It is very difficult to imagine that you can levy taxes on them in each particular country. This could be possible, but this would imply that you are putting tremendous brakes to the development of commerce on the net, and the result would be that you do not create as much wealth as you could, much less. Because the company cannot have 28 different tax systems to comply with. You need cooperation at European level, but also at the world level. It is an evident case in which you need world governance. And I wonder whether if the wealth produced in the net were appropriately taxed, a part of that money that Professor Sachs is looking for the support of the poor, or the most poor of the poor, could be found. I have not quantitative idea, but I strongly suspect that a strong portion of that resources could be found there.